Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are now going to begin session 6, which is titled Change How You See How You Change, Injecting Art into Medicine to See Beyond Diagnosis and Disability, with award-winning photographer Rick Guidotti. This will be moderated by Dr. Baraka Floyd, who will introduce herself and then introduce Rick. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Dr. Baraka Floyd. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a petite African American woman with long, straight hair and a pink sweater. I'm excited to join you today for this presentation with Rick Guidotti. He's an award-winning photographer who's worked all over the world in high fashion photography, but has spent the last 25 years collaborating internationally with nonprofits, hospitals, med schools, educational institutions, museums, galleries, and so many other groups, really to affect a sea change through positive exposure, which is his nonprofit organization promoting a more inclusive, equitable, and compassionate world for individuals and communities at risk of stigma and exclusion. I'll pass it along to Rick.
Thank you so much for that. That was great. Thanks. So, hi everybody. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm so excited to present. So, I'm the founder of this organization, Positive Exposure. Of course, an organization that celebrates the beauty and richness of human diversity. I started out my career though as a fashion photographer, living in Milan, Paris, and New York. My studio was in New York City. Here's a great shot of a beautiful image of our gorgeous Claudia Schiffer from a Harper's Bazaar shoot. So living in Milan, Paris, working with some great models, great clients was very exciting. Elle magazine, Marie Claire magazine, French Elle magazine. I did a lot of work for the House of Yves Saint Laurent in Paris. That's a portrait of Mr. Saint Laurent that's in every boutique worldwide and an image from one of our global campaigns. It's New York Style magazine. And of course, here's the extraordinary Cindy Crawford from a Revlon shoot. Extraordinary to be working in this fashion industry, working with these great models and these incredible clients. But it was also really frustrating because I was always told who was beautiful. I was always told who the model of the moment was, who the face of the season was, and who we had to photograph. And we'd run and photograph that face, and then we'd change the next season. What was so frustrating for me is as an artist, I continue never to see beauty just on covers of magazines. I see beauty absolutely everywhere around me. As I was leaving my studio one afternoon after doing a casting for Elle magazine in New York City, I was walking down Park Avenue and I spotted this gorgeous kid waiting for a bus. She had long white hair, pale skin. She had this genetic condition called albinism. Albino was the common term. Beautifully, yet never included in the beauty standard. The bus came, she got on the bus, took off, and I knew I just had to find photographs of this gorgeous kid with albinism or friends of hers that shared the same genetic condition. Now, I studied photography, art, and filmmaking at the School of Visual Arts. So prior to that moment, I had never seen a medical textbook, but I knew that that would be a great start to find images of this gorgeous kid or friends of hers that shared the same genetic condition. So I went to the Barnes and Nobles in Union Square, close to where my studio is, and I opened my first medical textbooks to albinism. So excited to find images of this gorgeous kid, but instead I found these images. I found that center image of the pupil was marked the albino eye. This kid did not have bright red eyes. She had beautiful blue eyes. Then I saw lots of very negative images in society and then images in cancer clinics and then lots of photographs of not just kids with albinism, but many genetic conditions and diagnoses always presented the same way, usually in their underwear or naked, up against a wall in a doctor's office with those black bars across their eyes. I very quickly shut that medical textbook, put it back on the shelf, hoping to never have to see another medical textbook for the rest of my life. And I went to an encyclopedia thinking, that's where the photographs will be. They'll be in an encyclopedia. But there, I found the images in the circus. And it was like this family. I was like, what? And the more digging I did, the more negative representation I found. Certainly in Hollywood, which is the Princess Bride, the pit of despair, to Powder, who had albinism because his mother was struck by lightning when she was pregnant with him, to The Matrix Reloaded, there were these ghost-like characters that come in, they'd wreak havoc, and they'd simply disappear. To even most recently, the Da Vinci Code. It was evil Silas driving around Paris at night shooting at people. One of the first things I discovered in my exploration and research about albinism is that people with this genetic condition have an associated visual impairment. In fact, most people with albinism are considered legally blind. So certainly wouldn't be driving around Paris at night shooting at anybody and expect to hit any of their targets. Terrible information was out there. I was like, this is awful. But I did see that there was a support group called NOAA, the National Organization for Albinism and Hypopigmentation. Sorry about that. Hypopigmentation, NOAA. And there was support group for kids living with this condition and their families. I called them immediately, said, hey, I'm a fashion photographer. Let's show the world the beauty of albinism. This is going to be amazing. And they said, get lost. Oh, I'm an artist. I'm a New Yorker. I don't give up so easily. They made it very clear to me early days about their fear of exploitation. Every time there was a magazine article about a kid with albinism, it was always a story about a victim. It was always exploitative. It was always negative. It was always sensational. I'm like, well, I have to agree with you. I can't find one positive representation of albinism anywhere, and I've been searching. So let's do something strange here. Let's form a non-traditional partnership, fashion photographer, genetic support group, and together we can collaborate and create a photographic essay that celebrates the beauty of albinism. And they agreed. Positive Exposure was born the day. I'm so excited to get started. In walks the first model. Her name is Christine, and she's beautiful. 5'9", long white hair, gorgeous kid. Walks in, but with her shoulders hunched, head down, no eye contact, one word answers. This kid had zero self-esteem as a direct result of the teasing, the bullying, and the abuse she experienced every single day in the classroom environment. And it broke my heart to see this gorgeous kid with zero self-esteem, thinking, how am I going to photograph her? But just the day before, I had photographed Cindy Crawford on the same set in my studio for another Revlon shoot. And I thought, well, out of respect for this kid, I'm going to photograph her like I would any supermodel. So the fan went on, the music went on, and I literally grabbed a mirror that was next to the set, and I held it up there, and I said, Christine, look at yourself. You're magnificent. And this kid looked in the mirror, and she saw exactly what I saw. And her hands went on her hips, her head went in the air, and she exploded with a smile that literally lit up New York City. This gorgeous kid desperately needed to change the way she saw herself. Her community desperately needed to change the way that they saw her difference. So she created a philosophy that drives positive exposure almost 30 years later. And that philosophy is change how you see how you change. She walked into school the next day, not like she normally does with her head down, but with this newly recognized beauty in her own reflection. It was extraordinary to see that change and how sustainable that was. Those first images were a cover story in Life magazine called Redefining Beauty. It really got a lot of accolades for the magazine, got a lot of awards, everyone was like buzzing about it. It was fantastic. And I kept building on the portfolio of images after the Life magazine piece. But I did receive awards for that. And one of the most prestigious awards that I received was from the Genetic Alliance. And the Genetic Alliance is a coalition of all the genetic support groups based in DC, but worldwide. And they presented me with the Art of Reporting Award. Great honor. And as they presented me the award, the president at the time said, we're looking at all these images of albinism around the globe, and they're stunning, but there's a universal message here. This isn't just about albinism. This is about all difference. Would you ever consider coming to one of other family conferences and celebrating their difference? I'm like, great idea. I'd love to. She said, well, we have a conference coming up in San Antonio, Texas for the Chromosome 18 Registry and Research Society. Looked at her. She said, well, when you have an anomaly on your 18th chromosome. Now, remember, I'm a fashion photographer, so I've never heard the words anomaly and chromosome used in the same sentence prior to that moment. But I made a commitment to go to that conference, and I went. But before I went back to those medical textbooks. So I wanted to know what a chromosome 18 anomaly looked like. And these were the images that I saw. And they were terrifying. A lot of stillborn images, a lot of images of kids with cleft palates and trachs and feeding tubes and mobility issues. And these were terrifying images. Albinism was so easy, but I went to that conference. I arrived in the auditorium and there was a clown on stage making balloon animals. And as I walked in, I was instantly surrounded by kids screaming with laughter. There were kids with cleft palates and trachs and feeding tubes and mobility issues, but they were kids and they were having a blast. I'm like, where was that one smile when I was trying to research, one giggle when I was trying to research what a chromosome 18 anomaly looked like? These are some of my great friends that I met that weekend. Here's Pauline, Sean, Ellington, the coolest kid that I know, Remy, and Rebecca. There were kids, there were adults, they were peoples. Like, where was it? Where was that humanity in any of those images? We had a great weekend. I came back to my studio in New York City and I got a call from Francis Collins, who was then the director of the National Human Genome Research Institute. Francis said, we just mapped the people's genome. We're doing this big celebration. And he invited me to create an exhibition on albinism showing diversity in that diagnosis that would launch at the Museum of Natural History in DC and then move to other Smithsonian sites around the globe celebrating this new people's genome. So what a great honor. I was thrilled to do that. But I said, but Dr. Collins, is it possible? Because I just came back from this chromosome 18 conference, and there really is a human, there's really an it's about everybody. So could there be any possible way to invite other genetic support groups to be part of this? Because there really is this component, it's for about all differences. And he agreed. If you know Francis Collins, he was very enthusiastic, more than just agreed. So we did. We reached out to all the genetic support groups and everybody stepped up. The first group that stepped up was the Marfan Foundation. Now, Marfan syndrome is a connective tissue disorder. You grow very, very tall, of course, aortic dissection, scoliosis, pectus excavatum. But this was the images that I saw in those medical textbooks, and I understood the importance of how a connective tissue disorder presents itself for a healthcare provider in training. So I understood the value of this image, but I thought, as an artist, there must be another way that I can give you all the information that you need to glean from a photograph about a connective tissue disorder, but add the key ingredient that's missing. And of course, that key ingredient that's missing is Billy. That key ingredient that's missing is humanity. My great friends, some of my other friends over the years. Here's Caleb. He's living with achondroplasia dwarfism, a very common form of dwarfism. Caleb wants to be either a singer or an actor, but his father wants him to have a backup plan. So he wants him to go to medical school, and he's starting to apply to medical schools next year. Very exciting. That's our gorgeous Caleb. Dr. Nadia, she's living with a very rare form of skeletal dysplasia called acromesomelic dysplasia. Now, Dr. Nadia, I met her as a second-year med student in Doha, an education city, where she told me the only thing she needs to be a successful physician is a stepladder. She got that stepladder. She became a doctor. She went on to do her residency at Children's Hospital Dayton, Ohio, postdoc at Baylor, on to Children's Hospital DC. Now she's back in Texas at Children's Hospital there. She's an extraordinary young woman. That's our Dr. Nadia. Friends from the Costello Syndrome Conference. I went to my very first rhizopathies conference. It was Costello Syndrome. Very excited to meet people with this condition. Turns out it was their first conference too. They never met anyone that shared the same diagnosis. And I was there when they met, and they became instant best friends. And that whole weekend, they were there running around down the hallways, giggling and laughing. And every year I go back to that Costello Syndrome Conference, and they're still there, and they're still best friends. The only thing that's changed is they started a rock and roll band. They're really loud, but they're really, really amazing. My great friend Jasper with Angelman syndrome. Lucas living with Fragile X syndrome, of course, the leading familial genetic marker for autism. My great friend Jazara with Goldenar syndrome. Simone living with Down syndrome, representing the National Down Syndrome Foundation of Italy. Ronan living with Prader-Willi syndrome. I use him in every photograph because he reminds me of Frank Sinatra and I love him. Jada with 22q11.2 deletion, best giggle on the planet. Starting a project all across the US and also all across Canada, working with kids with autism and adults with autism, telling their stories, sharing their narratives around the globe. But make sure that we're really looking into really having individuals identify themselves and share their, and we value their incredible narratives and their incredible stories. So this exhibition is currently at the Edmonton Airport in collaboration with Brown, and then it went on to in collaboration with the University of Alberta. So the exhibition is at Edmonton currently. My great friend Chloe, now living with cerebral palsy. Chloe is nonverbal, but as you can see here, that does not mean that she's not going to let you know exactly what she's thinking at any given moment. And she's right there all the time. That's our gorgeous Chloe. We can never not present anything unless I bring Judy Human. I hope you've all seen Crip Camp. I'm sure many of you have. Judy Human is a disability, international disability rights, disability justice activist, but old school. Through a protest and a sit-in, she shut down a federal building to help them pass and enforce a rule, 504, to support people living with disabilities. Old school disability rights activists. Of course, here's modern day disability rights activist Gayton wrote into his contract every season they had to mention cloudal cranial dysplasia in at least 2 episodes each season of Stranger Things. And that's our incredible, so modern day activists. Also uses a social media platform to celebrate not just his condition, but all rare disease. Modern day activists. Kaylin, living with Sturge-Weber syndrome, came to she has birthmark bilaterally across her face. She has it internally. So she has a seizure disorder associated with Sturge-Weber syndrome. She came to the studio to be photographed and she brought outfit changes. We had so much fun photographing all day. It was a blast. At the end of the shoot, though, her mom calls me. She says, Kaylin never talks to me about school because she knows that if I hear kids are teasing her, I'm going to come in the next day swinging a baseball bat, and that doesn't help her at all. It just makes things worse. So but on her way home from your studio, she said, Mom, kids tell me every single day that I'm ugly. They tell me every single day that I'm a freak and I'm a monster, and I believe them until today. And then she mobilized. She got me to go to her school and present positive exposure to 400 students. And she was on stage with me in her little Madonna-esque headphones, running around screaming, "What is normal?" So this gorgeous kid created an equation, a formula for everything that we created positive exposure must follow. And that formula is self-acceptance equals self-esteem equals self-advocacy, to place in the palms of our hands of all of our ambassadors around the world the tools that they need to celebrate the beauty and richness of human diversity. One of those products that we've created with that formula is our Pearls product, which is an online blog platform creating space for all of our ambassadors to talk about life from their unique perspective. Here's Byron.
It's Byron. I live in the DC area. I'm 14. When I was 10 months old, I had a left hemispherectomy. I had the left half of my brain removed because I have something called Sturge-Weber syndrome. I wear a brace on my right leg and right arm. I only see out of the right side of each eye. So sometimes it's harder for me to see things on the right side. So playing sports can be frustrating because I might not see a ball coming. Um, I didn't see that coming.
So creating an opportunity for our ambassadors to talk about life from their unique perspective, but using their personalities, their sense of humors to really break down those segregating walls, not only in the classroom environment, but also in the work environment and in broader public arenas. That's extraordinary, Byron. I go to medical schools. I'm in more than half the medical schools in the country. I go to medical schools not because I want to teach the science behind a lot of these genetic conditions, but because I can actually pronounce arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. I know what it means only because I not studied it in the medical textbook, because I went to a family conference and met PJ. Now, PJ can't use his hands because of the type of arthrogryposis that he has. So his family calls eating technique is Viking dive, because he'll go into his plate of mashed potatoes and come up. And he goes to his plate of peas and he comes up. And then he chases his sisters around the table with a face full of mashed potatoes and peas. You will never forget arthrogryposis multiplex congenita, because you will never forget PJ. The summer conferences are all family conferences are all summer long. They start in June and go to August. And I go to as many of them as I can. And I bring local med students with me and I shove them in daycare and I lock the door on them and I leave them in there. And I check back in on them at the end of the day. And they always have like a little poop on their shoulder or gum in their hair. But they're going to be better healthcare providers because they met these kids not in crisis. They met these kids not in the clinical environment. They met these kids just being kids. And that makes those connections. That prompted us to create a series of films called Frame, Faces Redefining the Art of Medical Education. Very brief films, 10, 12 minutes long, presenting all the basic characteristics or highlights of a certain genetic condition, diagnosis, or topic, but as presented by somebody living that experience themselves and their families, placing front row and center in medical training humanity. Here's a sample.
As a dermatology resident, we learn to look for skin cancers in people with light skin. We know to expect type 1, type 2 skin, people who burn often, redheaded people, blonde people, straight-haired people. Those are the ones that are going to get skin cancer. Those are the pictures we see of skin cancer every day. So when we have a patient who's Middle Eastern, who's Black, who's brown, we don't expect them to have skin cancer. And when we see a mole on their skin, we don't think they're going to be the ones who have the skin cancer. We're more likely to reassure them. I was reassured multiple times that my mole was nothing.
It's my birthday.
My name's Alex,
And I'm Ezra.
and this is Cassie and Penelope. Hello. And Cassie was born with a genetic syndrome called Marfan syndrome.
We wanted to show you a feature Cassie was born with. As you can see, Cassie's chest sinks inward toward the middle. This is called pectus excavatum. But Penelope, what is it that you and Cassie call it?
Target. Target.
Why do we call it a target?
Yeah, she used to laugh all the time when I put water in it.
Why would you put water in there?
Because that's what made her laugh. Can you take a picture of it?
Oh yeah, I'm doing it right now. I'm making a movie of it.
So this is Christopher. He's 20 years old and he is autistic and nonverbal.
Hopa.
Yes, we're gonna go home on the bus. Looking back, I think there was a lot of sensory issues that I wasn't aware of, constant crying when we would go different places. We've been kicked out of dentist's office where, Chris was too loud or he wasn't able to sit and, we were told this is not the place for you and we can't treat you. So I've always, before I go, I try to make it known my son is autistic or he's on the spectrum and he might be loud. He might need to walk around. For Christopher, what I did was I've always shown him videos of going to the dentist, of them cleaning your teeth.
Chromosomes are the instructions that tell our bodies how to grow and develop. Most people have 2 copies of each chromosome for a total of 46 chromosomes. Some people have 47 chromosomes. Most people who have Down syndrome have 3 copies of chromosome 21, also known as trisomy 21. This is caused by a sporadic event known as non-disjunction, which usually occurs prior to conception.
Max,
Hi, I'm Mitch.
I'm 15 years old. It's been a great road for me. It's basically like an extra chromosome, and that chromosome blends in the awesomeness and blends in all of the loyalty, and I could go on and on about it.
Max can go on and on about it, and Max does go on and on about it every chance he gets. He's a great advocate for the Down Syndrome Foundation, but the society, but he's also just this incredible advocate for difference. He's out there celebrating difference every day. Each film, again, is accompanied by a photographic gallery, so you can see diversity in that diagnosis. Plus, we also add links certainly to the advocacy organizations, but also to other sites that can give you more information that you may need to glean from a film. That's only 12 minutes long or 10 to 12 minutes long. We have 51 films in our library. Currently, they're on our website under programs and films, and all of them are free to use, downloadable, and all the images are there. Everything is accessible. We start off with a lot of genetic conditions as well, but a lot of topics as we're adding as well. Our film that we just finished on sickle cell won in December. It was called The Strength to Fight, won the New York State International Film Festival's Best Documentary. So we're not only going to medical schools with these with these films to support healthcare providers in training, but we're also broadening our audience as well and changing the way the world sees difference, hopefully. So again, always searching for ways that we can impact medical students. I go to so many of these medical schools and I see that there's a lot of misinformation information around disability. Certainly when you're by being trained, being exposed to all these images, these negative images. And for me, as when I started positive exposure, from the reaction to these images, I always wanted to create an alternative to these demoralizing, dehumanizing, grim images. And we're about to launch Textbook Beauty. This will be an opportunity for these images to be used as an alternative. And there'll be images that will be offered to healthcare providers in training and faculty to use positive exposure imagery, and said creating lots of opportunities to infiltrate the education with images of humanity. Another great group of friends of mine from the NOAA, the National Organization for Albinism. But I have a lot of friends in the community. And as you see, and my great friend Silpa, who's helped a lot with our editing, a lot of our films, our frame films. She had a lot of comments. She was a third year, actually in this photograph, a second year med student, but a third year med student again. And we collaborated, and I would share films with her early days, and she would help with those edits. But she also introduced me, because she's just the kind of girl that she is, and she was a third year med student. This woman, she introduced me to Dr. Peter, and told me about other ways that we can impact medical training. Because I'm always so aware of with all our first year med students, I usually speak to first year med students, that they're always right there in the middle. There's always so many assumptions and biases and fears around disability within that community. And she told me about the Stanford Medicine Alliance for Disability Inclusion and Equity, and I reached out to Peter immediately and just said, well, this is what we're doing, and is there any possible way? And of course, Peter was very enthusiastic, and we created this series of images. And we started creating this sort of images, which launched at Stanford on the campus there, but it's actually going to be housed in other places. That will be a traveling exhibition, and we're building on this exhibition, collecting not only the images, but the stories, the interviews, the narratives of all these incredible individuals in the healthcare industry living and experiencing disability. We even had the great fortune to have a cover of our Dr. Kip in Helen magazine. So really just, it's the Helen Journal, the Journal of Human Exceptionality. Again, creating opportunities to see beyond difference, beyond diagnosis, to have different, sometimes difficult, but important conversations around disability. We have a gallery in New York City, which we're going to house the exhibition here as it's growing. It's going to be live because it's going to be an exhibition that's going to house not only our local, national, and global exhibitions, but bring in a lot of our healthcare providers. And we were for the last 6 years up in Harlem we're in East Harlem. The gallery was there, and it was our exhibition space, multimedia space. We had a lot of performance. It would house our gallery and also our film studios, and we have a lot of artists in residence. But we've since then started developing lots of exhibitions, certainly here with first year med students from Mount Sinai, illustrating their journey to medical school through their art, through photography, through film, through music. It's extraordinary, and through painting as well. It's just extraordinary artists, and really kind of making those connections with art, humanity, and beauty. But we've just changed. We moved here in January. We're now in downtown on Maiden Lane in Wall Street, financial district of New York City. We have 14,000 square feet to play in. So we're developing a positive exposure educational collective, where we're going to bring all of our communities, highlighting certainly our local, national, and global initiatives, but bringing all of the talent from our community here, and creating opportunities to have very important conversations with our healthcare community and our community of individuals living with intellectual, physical, genetic, and behavioral differences. Creating those opportunities. We're basing the whole collective on 4 basic pillars of thought. And it's going to be a space to gather, to reflect, to learn, and to share. So excited to be able to share. I'll give you all keys. I hope you're all in New York. We're opening next Saturday, May 3rd, with our first exhibition, and the exhibition is going to be open forever. So I'm very excited. So please come. If you're in New York City, just come on by. Love to see you. And that's very exciting news. I can't wait to start. So next Saturday we open. Again, that's our message: change how you see how you change. We all have the talent to change the way the world sees difference. We all have those passions and that enthusiasm. And I think together we can do anything. We open this gallery space because I know we're also creative and passionate, but we're also limited by our own imaginations. But together we can do anything. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Rick, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I always find myself slightly emotional because of the fact that there's such a contrast with the language that you use as you speak about your photography subjects and utilizing asset-based language and really leaning into what their experience is rather than what our interpretation is as medical providers. One of the questions that came up in the chat is whether or not there's a thought to having something similar to the Dove lineup, displaying the spectrum of neurodivergence or physical disabilities.
Oh, it's a beautiful question. We're creating so many different partnerships and collaborations with all of our communities. I've been working in the advocacy organization with advocacy groups for almost 30 years now, and there's so many beautiful ideas coming. So we're always creating initiatives. Now, I love the Dove campaign, but they dropped the ball because it only went so far. But there's a lot of really beautiful things going on, different conversations that are being had right now. One of the films we just received a grant and finished a series of films on mental health challenges and addressing the stigma associated with them through the arts. And those are films that we also did a whole series of films with the Robert Wood Johnson grant on aging in our IDD community. So there's a lot of interest out there to kind of promote, and it's always that person first philosophy where they're telling their own stories, creating opportunities to share their lives and their narrative.
One of the other things that is always remarkable to me is the connection with advocacy organizations that all of your work has. As you work with different medical schools, how do medical students get to participate in some of that advocacy work, or how might we participate in that advocacy work should we desire to do so?
There are so many ways to do that. The advocacy groups are so exciting. In fact, we're currently right now developing a curriculum around disability at Columbia Medical School. And so we just had the other day, we had med students, residents, faculty come here. We had so many friends from our community of people that identify as having a disability to be here to be interviewed, to share their stories. And I was sitting here watching, it was in this big space, and I was sitting here watching these connections, these lifelong connections being made. And it wasn't one group interviewing. There were these beautiful conversations going on that one never has an opportunity in that clinical environment. So we're always promoting an opportunity for healthcare providers in training and practitioners to come together to join and to have those one-on-one connections with families and advocacy organizations. And the advocacy groups are so excited to have, certainly working with med students, because they feel like they have a say in the future generation of healthcare providers are going to take care of them and their families. So there's so many conversations, and again, I bring med students with me to the family conferences, but in this space, in this collective that we're creating right now, we're now able to dream big. We're here without any restrictions. So I'm bringing lots of healthcare providers in training, institutions, hospitals, but family advocacy organizations to come in and to dream really big together. How will this impact? What will this experience do to change the future direction of medical education and training?
I'm going to ask a hard question just because I got excited as you were talking. As you think about folks coming into that space and dreaming big, if you were to look 2 or 3 years down the road, what might you imagine would happen?
Oh, that's such a great question. I love that question. That this becomes a very active space, that it doesn't need me in the middle of it, that it becomes a space that lives on its own, that's independent, that people come in and have conversations and form relationships and bounce off of each other and bounce ideas off of each other and create art. We're going to set up a whole series of looms in here that people are going to be able to come in and loom together, healthcare providers and family that are be accessible looms as well. So the idea is to come in to really, through the lens of art, the lens of humanity, the lens of love and beauty, to really kind of create new conversations around disability, to people to be seen, to be honored, to be celebrated for their difference, and not to be ashamed of it or felt that they have to hide it away or push it aside. Out there, front row and center in medical training, also helping all healthcare providers in training understand early in their training, that way that it's never what you're treating, but who you're treating, of course.
As I hear you talk about that and talk about centering humanity and love, what comes up for me is that many of us who are healthcare providers got into this space because of a care for humanity, and being able to pull all of that together to really strong advocacy work through the arts, I think is just phenomenal. All right. There was another question about whether or not you might be going to the Los Angeles area soon, or DC, or any other plans that are coming up for positive exposure.
Oh, I travel quite a bit. I'm always on the road. Yes, absolutely. There's all kinds of things on our calendar. So just reach out, positiveexposure.org. I'm Rick at positiveexposure.org, the phone number that's on the gallery, that's on the website. I'll answer the phone if I can. So it's a very easy accessible. We're not a really big team, but we're a strong team here, and we're really rich in human resources. We have a lot of friends in all the different communities around the globe. So we're here. There are ways to connect, ways to get things on scheduling, ways to get things, opportunities to get together. My calendar's always kind of up there on our website as well. So as I'm traveling, I'm always excited about maybe making a little pit stop left or right if we have to. I'm happy to do that. So yeah, absolutely. DC. I'm actually in DC next weekend for a conference. I'm there. They're starting with the film, The Strength to Fight on Sickle Cell. We're creating a whole gallery campaign celebrating the lives of people that are impacted by sickle cell. And so we're doing it all up and down the East Coast, and we're going to do the same thing on the West Coast. What we're doing right now, we're doing DC, Maryland, Philly, New York, New Jersey, and then further north. So there's always stuff going on. We've always got some exciting things. There's a lot of, and always open to new ideas as well. I always love to collaborate, certainly with this community of individuals that are so creative, starting with Peter and all of you. I've met all of you, and there's so much love and energy and passion and talent in this community. Let's dream big together, and let's come to this gorgeous space in the financial district and dream big.
Yes, I love that. I know we only have a couple of more minutes. I wondered if you could speak a little bit more about some of the work you've done to illuminate invisible disabilities, because I noticed that you did highlight familial dysautonomia, for example, as one of the diagnoses.
Sure, but I've never really photographed a genetic condition or a disability. It's always been that humanity, and so many of our great friends that may not have a visible disability, but they certainly have that beauty and that humanity. And it's important that we also highlight them. We're not just talking about physical differences; it's behavioral, it's intellectual differences as well. We just launched this whole series of films at 3. We're actually going to launch them on Wednesday night. We're having a virtual premiere of our 3 films on mental health challenges and this use of the art to challenge stigma associated with mental health, and really looking at the arts. And those are 3 films working in collaboration with the Fountain House, which is an organization that really supports people living with mental health challenges through the arts. So again, creating opportunity where people have a voice to create a space, no matter where we are in the world, no matter which culture, which community, which continent, or which language we're speaking, we all have the exact same need. And it's a need to be seen, a need to be heard, a need to be loved, and of course, a need to belong.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
One of the other things that comes up sometimes, someone brought up a question around mild disorders or disorders that are on the milder area of the spectrum, and bringing visibility to those in the way that they impact the individuals living with those disabilities.
So important. It's so important because it does impact us, and it impacts a lot of not only the individual who's living with that mild or however that impact, but across impact, certainly across from mild to severe, but really it impacts so many families. And I think it's important that we share all those stories. And everybody has a place. Everybody's invited to the party, but not only to come to the party, but to dance. And everybody has that story. And no matter where we are, when I'm like, say I'm at the Fragile X conference, it's so important that we focus on looking at impact, not only across the impact of Fragile X syndrome on that individual and their families, but looking at it across age, across gender, across ethnicity, culture, to make sure that there's representation there, that we all have that opportunity, that space, that we all have that, share that same space. So important.
Thank you so much for highlighting the intersectionality of human difference and the effort that you're taking to really assure that as you're photographing these individuals and telling their stories, that you're doing so in a way that's inclusive and really allows individuals to understand the intersectional experiences of folks with disabilities. I saw some folks talking about disability feminism and other issues.
Beautiful. Well, one thing that we're always looking at, and we see that we go to a lot of these family conferences and these gorgeous kids are there. One thing I am so aware of is that these gorgeous kids turn into gorgeous adults, and we have to keep the light on them. And we've got to keep telling their stories and make sure that they're out there and that they have space at that table and they're able to talk across the board, and that we're all, and that their narrative is honored and respected, and it has a valuable place for all of us to understand. And every photograph that you'll see in all of my exhibits, certainly the one there at Stanford, you walk up to this beautiful photograph, this gorgeous person and this energy coming off. You're also aware of your own reflection because they're always face mounted on glass. So it's instantly the messaging. It's not about them. It's about us, only us.
I love highlighting that it's about us. And as I think about my role as a pediatrician and really helping children to understand how they belong and helping parents to support that, I love highlighting that shared experience because that shared experience is what helps us to be able to be better providers and meet people where they are.
Beautiful.
One other question that I had as I've gotten to know you and seeing this presentation again today, when you think about barriers that might be present for moving this work forward, what barriers do you see and how might we as a community be able to help impact those?
I think it's having biases or assumptions around difference and around what families are willing to present. I think it's about all getting on board and seeing humanity and celebrating difference and knowing that nobody, nobody wants to be seen or identified as a disease or diagnosis. Always a person first and always seeing that humanity first and foremost. I think that's where the stoppage happens. That's why I go to first year med students to start this conversation early to make sure that we see and celebrate that difference. But really creating those conversations really around early days in our healthcare education to make sure that we start those conversations and make sure that on board are the families, not just the individual living with a difference, but also the families are included in those conversations. So I don't think we have much time, but I went to South Korea. I was there working on an international global initiative for undiagnosed initiatives, working with kids that don't have a diagnosis and adults. Because when you have a diagnosis, you have your advocacy group, your family. And we were going to Seoul with the hospital that was hosting us there. They were very concerned that culturally in South Korea, that we were not wanting to be photographed. They were not wanting to celebrate the difference. It was much more quiet, much more private, much more reserved. So, and they said that there were, and for us to go, we had to have at least 5 families be part of this for us to make that journey. And they were very worried. So they had me do a little presentation that they recorded and translated and presented it to a lot of their families. And they invited 35 families thinking they would get 3 to 5. We gave them the community, we gave them the information that we had 3 to 5, we would go. And they reached out to 35 families. All 35 families participated. There was so much love in that room. It was incredible. And the pride and the celebration was incredible. Again, our own assumptions, our own biases, and our own fears around that. It's just being open up those conversations.
Thank you so much for bringing visibility to individuals who are living with disorders that aren't yet diagnosed, right? Because so much of that work really is done in silence and it's not often thought about. So thank you so much for that effort.
My honor.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I always am moved and nearly in tears every time I see it. So thank you so much that you're doing to assure that we're focusing on individuals and their stories rather than their diagnoses.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for this.
Thanks so much, Baraka and Rick. That was a great presentation. I would say, Rick, I love your energy. You know, when you came to Stanford, that you've been there twice now, I think, and each time, like everybody who interacts with you goes away feeling like this warm fuzzies. Basically, you spread this joy with you wherever you go. And I know that your heart is so authentically grounded in this work and people can feel that. And so keep spreading the joy.
Thanks, sir.